Last episode, Russia dismantled every Ukrainian political institution it could find. The Hetmanate, gone. The Zaporozhian Sich, burned. The name Ukraine, replaced with Little Russia by imperial decree. But here is what empires consistently underestimate. You can ban a language in schools, but you can't ban it from mothers singing to their children. You can erase a state, but you can't erase the memory of having had one. Welcome to Episode 4, the 1800s, the century where Russia tries to kill the Ukrainian language with laws, and Ukraine answers with the greatest poetry it has ever produced. By 1800, Ukraine was split between two empires, Eastern and Central Ukraine, under the Russian Romanovs, Western Ukraine, Galicia, under the Habsburg Austrians. Two different systems, two very different experiences of Ukrainian identity. In Russian-controlled Ukraine, the policy of Russification was accelerating. Ukrainian nobles who hadn't already assimilated were under constant pressure. The Ukrainian language was being pushed out of administration, education, and public life. In Habsburg-controlled Galicia, the situation was different. Not perfect, but different. The Habsburgs, managing a multi-ethnic empire, generally allowed minority languages to function. Ukrainian, called Ruthenian in Austrian terminology, could be used in churches and some schools. And into this world, in 1814, in a small village in central Ukraine, a serf child was born. His name was Taras Shevchenko, and he would become the single most important figure in the history of Ukrainian national identity. Shevchenko was born into serfdom, the property of a Polish noble, legally no different from livestock. He showed extraordinary artistic talent as a child, taught himself to draw, and through an extraordinary series of events, was brought to St. Petersburg, the heart of the empire that owned him. In 1838, a group of Ukrainian and Russian artists, including the painter Karl Bryulov, organized a lottery of a Bryulov painting to raise money to buy Shevchenko's freedom. It worked. At age 24, Taras Shevchenko became a free man. 4 years later, he published Kobzar, a collection of Ukrainian language poetry that hit the Russian Empire like a thunderbolt. It wasn't just poetry, it was a declaration. Ukraine exists. Ukrainian is a language. Ukrainians are a people. Shevchenko wasn't alone. Around him in Kiev in the 1840s, a group of Ukrainian intellectuals formed the Brotherhood of Saints Cyril and Methodius, Ukraine's first modern political organization with an explicitly Ukrainian national program. Their program was remarkable for its time: the abolition of serfdom, the creation of a federation of Slavic peoples, and, most radically, the recognition of Ukraine as a distinct nation with its own language, culture, and political rights. The Brotherhood lasted less than 2 years. Russian secret police infiltrated it in 1847, arrested the members, and sent them into exile. Shevchenko received the harshest sentence: 10 years of military service in Central Asia, with a specific ban on writing or drawing. For 10 years, Shevchenko served as a common soldier in the Central Asian steppes. Writing was forbidden. Drawing was forbidden. He did both anyway, hiding his work in his boots, in bookbindings, anywhere the guards wouldn't look. He returned in 1857, aged, broken in body, but not in spirit. The poems he had written in exile, the sketches he had hidden, were eventually published and became founding texts of modern Ukrainian literature. The empire's harshest punishment had produced Ukraine's greatest literary legacy. The 1800s were also the century of Polish national uprisings against Russian rule, 1830 and 1863. And these uprisings had a complicated Ukrainian dimension that is rarely discussed. Polish nationalists fighting Russian rule often assumed that Ukrainian peasants would naturally join them. After all, they shared the same enemy. But Ukrainian peasants remembered centuries of Polish landlordism. The enemy of their enemy was not automatically their friend. After the 1863 uprising failed, Russia's reprisals were brutal and specifically targeted Ukrainian cultural life, which St. Petersburg associated with Polish influence and separatism. The result was the most aggressive language suppression policy Ukraine had yet seen. In 1876, Tsar Alexander II signed the Eames Decree, one of the most extraordinary documents in the history of linguistic suppression. It banned publishing books in Ukrainian, importing Ukrainian books from abroad, staging Ukrainian language theatrical performances, and teaching in Ukrainian. The decree was based on a remarkable premise that the Ukrainian language did not actually exist. It was merely a dialect of Russian, artificially constructed by Polish agitators and Ukrainian separatists to undermine the empire. The official position? There is no Ukrainian language to ban. And yet, here is the ban. The Eames Decree pushed Ukrainian cultural production west to Habsburg, Galicia, where it couldn't be suppressed by Russian law. Lviv became the de facto cultural capital of the Ukrainian national movement. The empire's ban had accidentally created a safe haven. In Galicia, Ukrainian national consciousness was developing without the constant threat of Siberian exile. And its leading voice was even Franko, writer, poet, political activist, and the man who picked up where Shevchenko left off. Franko wrote in Ukrainian at a time when doing so in Russian-controlled territories meant arrest. In Galicia, he could publish, but the Habsburg authorities still imprisoned him 3 times for his socialist and nationalist views. Great literature, it seems, irritates every empire equally. Franko's vision of Ukraine was explicitly modern and political. He wasn't just preserving folk culture. He was arguing for Ukrainian statehood, for social justice, for a Ukraine that belonged to its people, rather than to whichever empire happened to be sitting on it. The defining social event of the century wasn't literary. It was the abolition of serfdom in the Russian Empire in 1861, in the Habsburg Empire in 1848. For the first time in centuries, Ukrainian peasants were legally free. But legal freedom and actual freedom were different things. Former serfs were freed, but the land remained with the nobles. Ukrainian peasants were legally free and economically dependent. The social structure had changed, the economic reality much less so. For the Ukrainian national movement, the peasant question was central. The poets and intellectuals knew that any real Ukrainian nation would have to be built from the bottom up, from the villages, from the folk culture, from the millions of Ukrainian-speaking peasants who were the actual living body of the nation. By the 1890s, a paradox had emerged. Western Ukraine, under Austria, had political parties, Ukrainian-language newspapers, cultural organizations, and a functioning civil society. Eastern Ukraine, under Russia, had the Eames Decree, the secret police, and Siberia. This divergence would have enormous consequences in the 20th century, when the two halves of Ukraine would come back together under very different circumstances, carrying very different political cultures and very different ideas about what Ukraine should be. The century closed with Ukrainian national consciousness stronger than it had ever been, and Ukrainian political power weaker than it had been since the Hetmanate. The ideas were ready. The institutions were not. That gap would define the next 100 years. Next episode, the 1900s, the most violent century in Ukrainian history. World War I destroys 4 empires simultaneously, and in the chaos, Ukraine declares independence. For the first time since Khmelnytsky, Ukraine is a state. This situation lasts for 3 years. Then the Bolsheviks arrive. Next comes the Holodomor, a man-made famine that occurred between 1932 and 1933 and affected 3 to 5 million Ukrainians. Then comes World War II. Next comes Soviet rule. Finally, the year 1991 arrives. Ukraine's most devastating century. And its most triumphant ending. Episode 5, the finale of the series. Coming next! 5 centuries of surviving empires. One more to go. This has been 100 years of Ukraine. I'll see you in the final century.